Welcome to the MyWhoosh Sunday Race Club.
Off from the line they go. Crazy, hectic, of course, already. So here we are back at the front of the group. We have Tim Cutler, who has put a pretty good gap on the guys already, about 8-second gap, and we're only 8.1 kilometers in, so it's going to be interesting to see what he has planned, what he's got up his sleeve here. So the guys on our left side of the screen here, now 35.5 kilometers. Just 100 meters, they're going to go ahead and take a right and then a hard left and start going up the mountain. So now Philip Graves and Saeed breaking up the group ever so slightly. Here, Pablo Popovich has gone off the back. Saeed 5.97 now for Philip Graves. Philip Graves isn't letting him get too far ahead. Now they're going to break it out for the open sprint here. Philip Graves currently ahead of Saeed just ever so slightly. Saeed now coming through. There's Philip Graves now back on the screen. He's going to come through and he's going to take victory. Sweet, sweet victory from Saeed on our second qualifier race here. And now we got Bruce Bird and Mr. X100 coming in and rounding out our top four.
Hello and welcome to MyWhoosh, to the qualifier race at number 3. As always, it's the Sunday Race Club. We're getting ready to bring the riders to the start line for the beginning of what is going to be another amazing race. We've got 45 kilometers of racing for the men. Let's take a look then at the profile. This is not got too much climbing compared to the last 2 rounds of racing, 740 meters. Along the way, though, we've got our countryside sprints, our king of the jungle and our king of the desert, before the run into the race finish at the end of that 45 kilometers. A little bit rolling at the start, as you can see, but we're going to keep you entertained and keep you up to date with exactly what is happening. That first sector of this MyWhoosh Sunday Race Club, 392.5 meters of elevation, so a very tough opener, and then the race becomes a little bit more open as we head towards the race finish. Let's take a look then at the teams that are taking part in this year's competition. Here's our team lineup. Well, today, certainly, we're going to see the UAE Clan race team. They're going to be well represented. So are the UAE Road Warriors, Abus Lacol, Community Sport Club, Danish Pavlova. And as always, that Yorkshire Pudding Express team, they're looking strong, as well as bringing in Toyota Cryo RDT. Category 1. The riders will be in the yellow jerseys that you can see there on the left-hand side of the screen, but we'll keep everyone identified for you. Today, our Category 2 section has not got too many riders in it. This is the makeup of the squads who've taken part in the series. The UAE Falcons have been particularly on good form during the Category 2 races, with 2 victories so far. The climbers also have had a very strong showing in the opening 2 races, as have Team Italy and X-Pro as well. So there's the makeup of our Category 2 riders. They will be in the green jerseys. Throughout the race then, we'll see all the data on the screen as we take a look here at Category 3. And 3 squads are represented: the CM team, Team Italy and the Warrior men. So far, we have seen some pretty strong showings in this Category 3 situation. And we've got the CM team in particular look pretty strong. The riders then are on the start line. They're just warming up. As you can see, 1 minute until we get this race underway. The riders just warming up on their static trainers. Everyone at this moment in time always just a little bit nervous, getting themselves ready for what they know is always a really fast and furious start. You've got to get off this start line nice and quickly. Got to make sure that you're in the mix. Get into the draft of the riders with you and then make sure that you can push on through into that first sprint that's going to come up. And that first countryside sprint comes up very quickly after 2 kilometers of racing. Well, it's a pleasure to bring you today's race. I'm Anthony McCrossan. Thanks very much for joining me. We're about to get this race underway. This is race number 3 of the Sunday Race League. Counting down then, the riders are off and underway, and a really flying start off the start line. Everyone really has got to get the power up as high as possible as they get themselves off this start. A few riders just making their way off the front, and it's one of the Category 2 riders who's had a very, very strong showing off that initial start line. We're watching Dexter Abello at the moment, and Jose Aviedo also up towards the front. Let's just take a look at how things are starting to shape up. You can see the amount of power that these riders are putting out in the opening first few hundred meters. We've seen some power outputs up towards 6 watts per kilogram. In fact, Michael Knudsen at the moment is up at 6.5. Watching here Philip Graves as he starts to accelerate. A big move by Philip Graves, this British rider, putting in 5.8 watts per kilo at the moment, and being joined here by Michael Knudsen, and Mitch Ferry also is up towards the front. So Philip Graves, who was on great form last time, he won race number 2 in the Tour of the Desert. And there we are with the little group of riders at the front, and the chasers are now around about 2 seconds back. So they're starting to open up a little bit of an advantage. And there's the showing on the right-hand side. You can see the familiar sight of those little groups as they start to form. And that group off the front is starting to work nicely. So we're only 2 minutes into this race. See here, Philip Graves, the heart rate is up at 165 beats a minute, and he's not holding back at all. He really is putting in a huge amount of power, and we're getting a little bit now of a settling down in the rhythm. Tim Cutler, though, putting in 7 watts a kilo, and Michael Knudsen just trying to get on his wheel as well. Philip Graves, quite happy, just sitting up there towards the front. And Bart van den Eckhout also looking strong today as well as he goes through to the front. And now we're getting a little bit of a reformation as we've got a number of riders who have found themselves into that front group. Still putting out Yusuf Badal, 294 watts a kilo. Now here's the start of our first sprint of the day. This is our countryside sprint. It's 1 kilometer in length. Let's see who manages to find their way through and take this victory. We're just taking a look here at Mr. X100, who's a rider who so far has taken some good showings in these races, but he's not up there in the mix so far. He was 5th in race number 1, and he was 4th in race number 2, so he had started to show some really good form. Putting out 6.1 watts per kilo and trying to get himself across. He's making a little bit of an acceleration as we go thundering over the bridge now. A little bit of a rumble across this particular section. Back here with Michael Knudsen, who is lying 5th overall at the moment. He's in that front group of riders. And that front group is starting to look pretty strong. This is our first of our sprints. The first sprint as we go through, and it was right up there at the front, Philip Graves, who took the first sprint. Let's just take a little look here. It was Philip Graves, 6.1 watts per kilo, ahead of Mitch Ferry and Jonas Barrehead, who was up there in 3rd place. Philip Graves then, again showing just how strong a rider he is. There's the makeup of the rest of the riders. There's the top 12. Pablo Popovic has also been a winner in this series of races, the Sunday Race Club. He's down there on the leaderboard, but not up towards the front yet. The gap between the riders, as you can see, pretty slender between the front group of riders. Philip Graves with a pretty high heart rate so far. We're back on board with Michael Knudsen. Knudsen still looking pretty strong. Up towards the 5-minute mark now. And back with Vidar Mail. Vidar Mail so far has been on good form. Third in round number 1. Just accelerating hard now. And there's the situation on the right-hand side of the screen with the second of the chasers, Mr. X100, leading that group. And they've really got to start to work together now. Got to work through, use your teammates, help you get through back up towards the front if at all possible. Second group, though, as you can see, the watts are pretty even between the two groups. But second group on the road is doing 45 kilometers an hour. The front group is doing 48. Let's make our way on to sprint number 2. We go through there. Now the front of the race then. Ollie Jones, Philip Graves, Vidar Mail. Nicely through for the second group on the road. This is the second of our sprints. Another 1 kilometer sprint takes us between 5 kilometers of racing and 6 kilometers today. Philip Graves has already taken that first of our sprints. Can he take sprint number 2 as well? This is Ollie Jones. Second wheel, 321 watts. Heart rate up towards 168 now as he puts on the pressure. And this is Bart van den Eckhout, who leads the second group of riders on the road, the Belgian rider. The second group is working pretty nicely. Philip Graves and Ollie Jones are opening up a slight advantage on the second group of riders. Coming up towards the end of the first sprint. Graves took the first one. Ollie Jones trying to take a little bit of advantage here. Who's going to take sprint number 2? Big move here by Ollie Jones. Is he going to take it? Ollie Jones goes through. He takes sprint number 2. Here's our results. Riding for the Danish Pavlova team. Ollie Jones was there. Philip Graves of the Yorkshire Pudding Express. But it was SS who was the fastest over that countryside sprint. And of course our sprints taken on the time across that whole section. Pablo Pavovic, 1:22.284. X100 at 1:22.580. And Ollie Jones, having crossed that line first, he ends up in 4th place at 1:23.307. So it shows us then that the second group on the road is starting to make some inroads. The UAE clan team, so strong overall in the racing. Now looks like a big acceleration by SS as he tries to come back. The gap then between the riders, not too distinct yet. Up on the top of the screen on the right hand side, you get an idea of the sort of elevation we've covered so far. 81 meters of climbing completed, and we've got in total a fairly significant amount of climbing for the riders to take into consideration today. 740 meters. So we've still got a considerable amount of climbing to do. And this opening section with that elevation of nearly 400 meters means that we are covering well over half of the first of the climbing today in the first 17.3 kilometers of racing. Onto this next little section now. This is a bit of a cheeky uphill rise. We go back here to take a look at Michael Vink. He's lying 12th at the moment. Mr. X100 lying 9th at the moment as he accelerates to try and get across. There is a concerted effort being made by this second group of riders to get themselves back up towards the front. That leading group, numbering 4 riders now, and they make their way to sprint number 3. So a 1 kilometer sprint now. Let's see who's going to be the fastest across this particular section. This is Michael Vink, starting to suffer a little bit, lying 12th place. Philip Graves back here with Mr. X100s. He's in this second group on the road, up at 400 watts and riding strongly at the moment, up towards the 40 to 50 kilometer an hour mark. This is Mr. X100, 38 kilometers an hour over the crest of this climb, which is a really bit of a strength sapper. 138 meters of climbing completed. Now, can they work together and get themselves back up to the front of the race? Mr. X100, 8th on the road, now moving up into 7th, drops down into 9th place. Countryside Sprint number 2, confirmation that it was SS who took that in 1:22. Who's going to take sprint number 3? This is Bert van den Eckhout. Up towards the front, though, this is Tim Cutler. We're watching him as he goes through the line. And in a second, we're going to find out who is the rider who's taken the sprint. Here's the results of sprint 3. So it was Mr. X100 who took it in 1:31. Just behind him was Vidar Mail in 1:31.878. Then it was SS in 1:32.109. Pablo Pavovic in 1:32.442, followed by Bart van den Eckhout, and in 6th place, Tim Cutler in 1:33.231. Heart rate there for Mr. X100, 148. There's some pretty high heart rates there, aren't there? Look at Tim Cutler, up at 179 beats a minute. The UAE clan team looking strong today, aren't they? Watching Philip Graves now. Things are starting to come back together. A much bigger group of riders at the front. Just a reminder then of today's race. This is the men's challenge. 740 metres, 45 kilometres in length. Got our opening sprints, the 5 sprints that come up. There we are. There's our profiles. There's the little sections that the riders go through. That opening section that we're in now is the most tricky one. And the first 3 sprints taken by Philip Graves, SS and Mr. X100. Right hand side of the screen, you can see our riders in green, and they're our second category riders. They've just gone through sprint number 3, and we're on board with Dexter Abeo there on the right hand side. On the left hand side, in the yellow jerseys, are our category 1 riders. You can see here on the category 2s, the watts are not quite so high, and each person in their MyWhoosh category will find their level, find where they are comfortable. We've got the races for the first, second and third category riders today. Riders qualifying to go through to the big prize money final, which will be on the 29th of May. with Dexter Abeo up there towards the front of that second category group. Philip Graves leading as always up towards the front of his first category group. That's the group in the yellow jerseys on the left-hand side. We're on board now with Pablo Pavovic. Rides for the team of UAE Clan. Just coming up towards the 11-kilometre mark now. 45 kilometres the riders face today. As we come up to sprint number 4. This sprint takes the riders from 11 kilometres to 12 kilometres and 1 kilometre in length. Very important to try and eke out the amount of pressure during this 1 kilometre section. Keep the pressure on as much as possible. So we're on board with Pablo Pavovic, lying 9th out of the riders in the race today. Don't forget, if you're watching today's race, thank you very much for taking the time. Follow us down there at the bottom of the screen on our various social media at MyWhoosh. And if you want more information on how to take part in these races, go to MyWhoosh.com. There's lots of information on there as to how to get involved, how to take part in the Sunday Race Club. And if you are a rider who wants to race and take part, there are prize money races for all the categories throughout this season. So make sure you go on and take a little bit of a look. The riders will be racing for that all-important prize fund on the 29th of May. The Category 1 riders racing for 10,000 dirhams. Category 2 for 8,000 dirhams. Category 3 for 6,400 dirhams for the first rider across the line. Coming up towards the end of sprint number 4. It's been a pretty flat-out sprint, as you can see. The riders up at 460 watts on this particular uphill rise to this checkpoint. Who's going to go through here? Who's going to take sprint number 4? Let's take a look then at the results. And it's Vidar Mail this time, who goes through with a time of 1 minute 37.320 ahead of Tim Cutler in second. Michael Knudsen riding for the Danish Pavlova team in third, and the Yorkshire Pudding Express in fourth place. So it's an all edible top 4 by the looks of things as far as the teams are concerned. 1:37.320 is the winning time for sprint number 4. Heart rate there for Vidar Mel, 155 beats a minute, putting out 5.6 watts per kilo. One more of our sprints to come up. That takes us between kilometre 14 and kilometre 15. And our front group of riders really has settled down into a nice rhythm. Here's our second category riders in the green, and a reminder of where we are right now. So we've gone through the first of our 4 sprints. There we are on the left-hand side. 4 sprints completed, 1 more sprint to go. Then we take ourselves on to sector number 6, which will be our King of the Jungle, and that takes the riders on a 10-kilometre stretch between kilometre 19 and kilometre 29. After that, we've got our King of the Desert, which is 33 to 43 kilometres, and then I'll run in to the race finish. A reminder then of our front group. There they are. Mitch Ferry's up there, so is SS, Bart van den Eckhout, and it looks like we've got a little bit of an attack as Mitch Ferry tries to go clear. Mitch Ferry putting in a huge turn now, 351 watts for Mitch Ferry. He's looking good, isn't he, as he goes clear. He's done 13.5 kilometres. He's clearly decided, let's try and break the race up. Finished 6th last time in the Tour of the Desert. That was a 900 metres of elevation race, 45 kilometres of distance. Rides for the Yorkshire Pudding team. He'll deserve his Yorkshire Pudding later on this afternoon. With this amount of power he's putting out, still up at 6 watts per kilo. This is a real explosion by Mitch Ferry. The chase is on behind. And we come up to the start of sprint number 5. Mitch Ferry with that little bit of an advantage. Now remember, it's all about the sprint along the kilometre, so it's not necessarily the case that he will win the sprint. Looking strong so far though, and still maintaining this advantage. He is the leading rider of the 66 riders who are in the field today. .451 watts. Cadence now a little bit steady at around about 68. So he's spinning a pretty big gear up this rise. Coming up towards the 15-kilometre point. Heart rate at this point as he puts in this momentous effort. 429 watts and a heart rate up at 162 beats. Looking good. Can he keep this one going at the moment? Through sprint number 5. Who is going to take this one? Let's take a look then at sprint number 5. It was Mitch Ferry who did manage to take sprint number 5, 131.219. Heart rate up there, 158. Second place was Ollie Jones of Danish Pavlova. Third was Bart van den Eckhout of the Toyota Cryo RDT team. And then Popovic was up there as well. Confirmation then on the left-hand side that Mitch Ferry was the winner of that intermediate sprint, and we have completed the 5 sprints so far. .45 kilometres of racing to go. Sorry about a little bit of stickiness in the feed at the moment. There's our ranking on the right-hand side. .380 watts for the leading rider. And Mitch Ferry still with this advantage intact. He is looking superb this afternoon. Clearly decided that he wants to go out there and try and take today's race victory. 6th last time out. Oh, he's really dishing it out to everyone, isn't he? Looking supremely powerful. The rest of the chasers trying to bring him back. Mr. X100 working well. And now they need to start to rotate a little bit. Start to put in the pace, help each other out a little. Pablo Popovic, very experienced in this racing. Just trying to get everyone working well together. So all of these races so far, round number 1 was 45 kilometres. That was the Tour of the UAE. Round 2 was 45 kilometres, but it was round number 1 with 1,017 metres of climbing, which was the toughest of our qualification races so far. Mitch Ferry still maintaining his lead out the saddle as he makes his way up over that little rise. His advantage, though, looks to be diminishing. Michael Knudsen is happy to close this gap, the Danish rider. SS is also up there. And Ollie Jones playing it a little bit clever, sitting there in 4th place as he moves up now. And it looks like Mitch Ferry's time in the lead is over. And it's all going to come back together. Michael Knudsen 181 beats a minute. That's been a momentous effort there for these riders. Rumbling over the next section. Now, next on the horizon for the riders is this particular section. They'll feel the rumble of this as they make their way through the forest section into the jungle. A little bit more gravelly roads as well for the riders to contend with. This is a hard section of racing. Back with the next group on the road on the right-hand side of the screen. They are approaching the jungle now with Yusuf Boudou. He is trying to work together with the rest of the riders in that group and see if they can bring themselves back to the front of the race. So we're in the jungle. So a complete different change now of the scenery for the riders to take a look at. Different road conditions for them to contend with as well. Here with Tim Cutler now. Looks to be putting in a little bit of an acceleration. SS is trying to go with him. Mitch Ferry is also interested in trying to go with this move. Now, if you're sitting at home and you're wondering, how do I get involved in this? How do I ride these particular races? It's all possible. Category 1 riders, they have to be verified, so you have to do a little bit more than the Category 2 and Category 3 riders. Cat 1 riders have to have a special weigh-in. They've got to record their power data on both the power meter and on their smart trainer as well. And they have to take a look at their heart rate data as we just remind you of today's course. Category 2 and 3 riders, if you want to take part in these challenges, you just have to monitor your heart rate data and your smart trainer data. And of course, MyWhoosh will make sure that all the results are verified and there is no cheating sitting there at home on your smart trainer taking part in the races, because with such a great prize money fund on the 29th of May, then it all has to be nicely above board. Tim Cutler is our current leader as he makes his way onto the jungle section. Now, this is a time section held over 10 kilometers now. So Tim Cutler's got to keep the focus, keep the pressure on all the time, going slightly uphill. Now he drops down a little. He'll get some more speed. He's making his way downhill at just a little bit of a gradient. He's already completed 410 meters of the 740 meters that he has to do as far as climbing is concerned today. So another 330 meters of climbing still remain on today's race as we head up towards the half an hour mark. The riders have been racing for 27 minutes, coming up towards 28. Tim Cutler looking strong. Looking around, one rider coming up to him. This is Vidar Mel. Vidar finished third in the first round of racing. That was the Tour of the UAE. Finished behind Pablo Pavovic and Ollie Jones, who was in second place on that particular occasion. Ollie Jones is leading the chase now in group number 2. Back with Tim Cutler. And a big acceleration now at 800 watts. Ollie Jones launches, trying to get himself up towards the front. Almost at 10 watts per kilo by Ollie Jones. This is a spectacular acceleration. Well, he sprinted his way already to the front. Overtakes Tim Cutler, comes up to the shoulder. More riders manage to react. Coming across with him, Michael Knudsen and also Vidar Mel. And now we get another move. Ollie Jones trying to really capitalize on this acceleration. 6.2 watts per kilo. Michael Knudsen is up with him. Looks like we've got a bit of a split starting to form. This is our second group of riders on the road on the left-hand side of the screen. Mr. X100, they've missed this attack. They really do need to start to accelerate now. Bit of an easier section for the riders compared to this opening 17 kilometers that they had to endure. There's also a team competition during this round of racing. And we've got 4 qualification rounds. You need to ride 2 of those in order to qualify for the big prize money final. So you've missed out this time if you haven't registered, but make sure that you keep an eye on MyWhoosh.com, and therefore you can keep an eye on all the events that come up. And if you've never ridden MyWhoosh, but you do have a smart trainer at home, go on to MyWhoosh.com, download the app itself, and get involved. Remember that MyWhoosh, one of the sponsors of UAE Team Emirates, including the Tour de France winner Tadej Pogacar. Still our leader, up towards the front as we look at the chase now on the screen. Mr. X100, such a strong competitor, with a 5th and a 4th place so far in these rounds of races, refusing to give in and trying to make his way up towards the front. Well, these riders all riding at home, of course, but it's such a great way to get fit. Right hand side, we are on board with Michael Knudsen. Still working our way through the men's jungle, King of the Jungle section. We've got around about 7 kilometers to go until we'll know who was the fastest over this particular section. And don't forget, this afternoon we'll also have the women's race, which will be coming up after the men's race. We've had a really keen competition over the first 2 rounds of racing for our 3 categories. Make sure you stay around for that as well. 41 kilometers an hour for the second group. Still Mr. X100 there in that blue peak cap. The mirrored shades on the avatar, looking good. Out the saddle. Trying to keep this group working well, keeping the momentum going. Still haven't managed to close the gap though. A little bit of work still to do. You can see there on the left-hand side, the next group of riders just up the road. Pretty close, but the gap is still a few seconds. Michael Knudsen on the right-hand side, second in the race so far. We haven't seen Michael Knudsen feature in the racing so far. In race number 1, it was Pablo Popovic ahead of Ollie Jones, Vidal Mail, Philip Graves, Mr. X100 and SS. And in race 2 in the Tour of the Desert, Philip Graves took the victory ahead of Saeed Safarzadeh, Bruce Bird, Mr. X100, SS and Mitch Ferry. And it's really been the Yorkshire Pudding team, the UAE clan and Danish Pavlova who have dominated the racing so far. Ollie Jones on the right-hand side, our leading rider in race number 3. That heart rate holding it up there at a pretty high level of 169 beats a minute. Not long until the end of our King of the Jungle section. And then the overall situation as far as the road is concerned and the atmosphere, the scenery will significantly change when we make our way out of the King of the Jungle section and into our run in towards the finish. That's when we make our way into the desert. We have our King of the Desert section, which takes us between 33 kilometers and 43 kilometers. Still, this group haven't quite made it there yet, but they are closing in. You can see the front group just in front of them. 509 meters of elevation covered. It's much more of a flat road through the jungle. Can they get themselves back to this front group? There is a concerted effort, a really strong chase going on now. The gap is not significant. They're within touching distance now to get themselves into that leading group of riders. 5 riders in that front group. Well, thanks very much for joining us. This is the MyWhoosh Sunday Race Club, race number 3. An absolute pleasure to bring you this afternoon's racing. The riders taking part in this 45-kilometre, 740 metres elevation course. All the riders riding on their smart trainers at home, but putting in a huge effort and some great entertainment for all of us to watch. Still 5 riders in the leading group. Mr. X100 slowly but surely closing the gap on that group of 5. Ollie Jones. Front group has kind of settled down a little bit. They're not putting out anywhere near the power. The cadence is high at 90 revs a minute, but 340 watts. Looks like this gap might close if they can, just in that second group on the left-hand side of the screen, keep working through, keep chasing. Always good to have as many teammates there as possible. The 2 teammates working well together. In fact, 3 teammates working well together. Mr. X100, Pablo Popovic and SS from the UAE clan team. They're working well. They're keeping each other going. They're probably talking to each other as well on their race channels. The team director will be giving them little bits of information, giving them some encouragement as well. This racing all now very, very coordinated. Might be riding in isolation on a smart trainer, but these teams are very well drilled with their Discord channels, their race channels, their race radios. They're also on their video channels to each other as well. Just trying to keep the motivation going, keep the team together and work out the team tactics as well. It's very important for all the riders in the team to know what's coming up next. 26.5 kilometres of racing covered of the 45. Coming up towards the end of the King of the Jungle timed section. Now we make our way out through the tunnel. Now the racing will become a lot more open. No jungle to deal with. The riders now onto wider roads, a lot flatter as they make their way towards the end of today's race. With 2 kilometres till we find out who won the King of the Jungle. Right-hand side is our leading rider, Philip Graves, riding for the Yorkshire Pudding team, winner of race number 1. He also finished 4th in race, he won race number 2, and he won 4th place in race number 1. Still these 5 riders at the front. Tim Cutler, Vidal Mail is up there. Ollie Jones, Philip Graves, Michael Knudsen. Gap back to Mr. X100. You wonder whether he did a little bit too much work in the initial sections. Mr. X100 was the winner of sprint number 3. That countryside sprint that took us between kilometre 8 and 9. May have put himself into the red zone. .2 kilometres to the end of our King of the Jungle section. Still, that gap is tantalisingly close. They're nearly there, aren't they? You can see they're just almost 50 metres behind them now. Can this team of UAE clan rescue this situation. They've been put firmly on the back foot here by missing out on that attack. This is Philip Graves, the leading rider on the road. As he comes up now, you can see the archway just in front of him, coming up towards the end of the King of the Jungle, that 10-kilometer section. And we'll get the results very shortly, find out who's taken that section. The riders who've been most influential in the race so far: Graves, SS, Mr. X100, Vidal Mel, Mitch Ferry also. Heading towards the checkpoint at the end of the King of the Jungle. Who is going to be the fastest rider over that 10-kilometer section? We complete it now with the rider going through at the front, Ollie Jones. Let's take a look then at the results. And it's Mitch Ferry who is the King of the Jungle this afternoon. 1:31.219. Heart rate up there at 158 beats a minute. 414 watts for that section. Sorry, that was the result of that last sprint. So here's the King of the Jungle. So it was Ollie Jones. Ollie Jones takes the King of the Jungle in 13 minutes, 26.407. Heart rate up there at 166 beats a minute and putting out an average 390 watts. So he looked good over that entire section. Ahead there of Philip Graves in second and Michael Knudsen. So the Danish Pavlova squad dominating the top three. A little bit further back for the team of UAE Clan. SS there, their fastest rider, 13 minutes 31.317. Some fast times on the course this afternoon. Confirmation then, the King of the Jungle is Ollie Jones of the Danish Pavlova team in 13 minutes 26.407. Not too far to go now. 30 kilometres of racing completed. Our front group of riders still dominating this race, but it looks like they're about to be caught. Not too far behind is the group led by the UAE Clan riders. Ollie Jones doesn't want that to happen though, as he makes his way through to the front. This group of five have worked well since they went on the attack. They look to be sheltering each other nicely and working well. There's the way that the teams are working together. Philip Graves on the right-hand side, the leading rider. There's the chasers on the left-hand side. For a moment, it looked like it was going to come all back together. This time, it looks like it's not really going to happen. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Coming up for the riders now will be the King of the Desert, which is another 10-kilometre time section between 33 kilometres of racing and 43 kilometres of racing. And that takes us within touching distance of the race finish at 45 kilometres. The riders then coming up towards the 45-minute mark. They've covered 592 metres of the 740 metres of climbing that they faced today. Here's confirmation of the profile. So we've completed that opening section, that rolling section with the 5 sprints. We've gone through the second section now, which is our King of the Jungle. And we're now heading up towards that section number 7 that you can see there on the far right-hand side. This last section of racing, only 180 metres of elevation, but it's a little bit tougher than the middle section of racing. You can see there where we are and where we are heading. We are almost at that gantry number 7 there on the right-hand side. Well, if you've never watched or raced at MyWhoosh before and you're a fan of another platform, why not download the app, go to mywhoosh.com, get involved in the action. You can train, of course, on MyWhoosh, or you can take part in some racing. All you need to do is click on the events section and you can find out all about the racing that is coming up. Get involved in it. The big prize money race this time will be on the 29th of May. Of course, if you've not taken part in any of the first races, you won't be able to qualify for that. But why don't join us each Sunday and you can get involved in supporting a team or get involved in the action. As I said earlier, the prize money for Cat 1 this time on the 29th of May, 10,000 dirhams. Cat 2, 8,000 dirhams. Cat 3, 6,400 dirhams on offer for the winning riders. Coming up to the start of our next sector, the King of the Desert. 10 kilometers, and the first rider to go through and set off our timing is Tim Cutler as he races through at the head of this group of 5 riders. Confirmation then of who the riders are: Vida Mel, Ollie Jones, Philip Graves, Michael Knudsen, Tim Cutler. They are the riders in the front group of riders at the moment. Tim Cutler, we haven't seen him race in this round of racing before. He didn't take part in the top 6 in the first 2 rounds, but he's certainly been dominant today, hasn't he? Up there with Philip Graves. Michael Knudsen, also a rider that we haven't seen too much of so far in this racing on MyWhoosh in the first 2 rounds, but he's certainly looking superb today. Ollie Jones, Vida Mel, Philip Graves, Tim Cutler, Michael Knudsen are our leading 5. On board with Tim Cutler on the right-hand side, 308 watts now, rolling along at 87 revs per minute. So we keep all the data on the screen so that you can see exactly how these riders are performing at any particular time. It also means that if you get yourself onto MyWhoosh, you'll be able to get an idea. Am I up there? Am I competitive? Can I race against these riders? Gives you that little bit of confidence to get involved. MyWhoosh has been a long-standing sponsor of the UAE Team Emirates. So Tadej Pogacar, Pascal Ackermann, Yusuf Mirza, all those riders, Fernando Gaviria, the riders who are in the Giro d'Italia at the moment, all taking part in MyWhoosh sessions. And if you're looking at the sponsorship that is on the clothing of the UAE Team Emirates, then the riders are going well so far. The front of the race then, Michael Knudsen, Ollie Jones, Tim Cutler, all those riders heading through this next section. Don't forget to visit mywhoosh.com and follow us on social media at MyWhoosh on Instagram, on Facebook and on Twitter. Slightly different, my_whoosh is where you can follow. Still, this chase is going on. Cutler still up towards the front. Now we're into this time section now. Will the riders manage to set a nice fast time here? Remember that last 10-kilometer section was 13 minutes 26.407. Some wonderful racing between these two groups. But this second group on the road have never managed to get themselves quite back up there at the front, have they? 50 minutes of racing completed. Mr. X100, the 9th rider on the road. ...617 metres of climbing have been completed, so only 130 metres of climbing remaining for these riders. And that is mostly the long drag up towards the race finish. Still got about 6 kilometres until we reach the end of the King of the Desert. And our front group of riders, still Ollie Jones, Michael Knudsen, Philip Graves, Tim Cutler, Vidal Mail. The watts per kilo now stabilising at around about the 4 to 5.5 watts per kilo. Mr. X100 trying to put in a little bit more power to see if he can get himself across to the front. Little bit of an acceleration now from Tim Cutler. Who is going to end up winning this race? So far, we've seen Graves take one of the intermediate sprints. We've seen Vidal Mail took one of the intermediate sprints as well. Ollie Jones was strong through that 10-kilometre section. That second group on the road, though, does have some firepower with Mitch Ferry, with SS, with Mr. X100. Bart van den Eckhout ahead for the riders. A little bit of an uphill section now. And then it will roll downhill, give them a little bit of respite, be able to just recoup a little. Power on that little climb, 507 watts by Ollie Jones, as he just opens up a little bit of a gap on the rider in front of him, Michael Knudsen. Philip Graves starting to make some legs hurt. Last time out, Philip Graves won for the Yorkshire Pudding team ahead of Saeed Safarzadeh of the UAE clan. And it was Bruce Bird, Mr. X100, SS and Mitch Ferry. But Graves now is trying to break the will of the rest of the riders as he takes a glance around. This gap is dropping, and Mr. SS is absolutely flying his way across. Look at the watts per kilo. Has he managed to get his team up here? Another big acceleration. Mr. X100, his teammate, comes through to try and help him out. This is a big move. Very, very impressive. They can see the 5 riders in front of them. So it's SS, Mr. X100, coming across is Bart van den Eckhout as well. And he catches them. Mr. X100 goes to the front of the group. And in sight of the finish line, this race has come all back together. Well, what a race we're having this afternoon on this men's challenge. The 3rd round of the Sunday Race Club here on MyWhoosh. Who is going to take this? Tim Cutler now tries his hand. Puts in an acceleration, 7.5 watts per kilo. Immediate reaction from Philip Graves. Tim Cutler, the leading rider, out the saddle, putting in the power, stamping hard to try and put himself away from the chasing group. So just as SS and X100 came across, Tim Cutler thought, no, you are not going to stay with me. So he decides to try and go. There's a little bit of disarray behind as riders try to get in the slipstream. not far now from the end of the King of the Desert sprint. Tim Cutler leads Ollie Jones. There's about 7 or 8 riders now in with a shout. 7 riders in that group, with Tim Cutler with just that slender advantage. Up there on the top of the screen, you can see we've only got 50 metres of climbing remaining until we find out who wins race number 3 in the Sunday Race Club. Let's all come back together again. It's a little bit cagey now in this round 3. Ollie Jones, always vigilant, always up towards the front. Philip Graves just hovering in the wheels at the moment. Coming up towards the 40-kilometre point in 55 minutes. It's been a very fast race so far. Left-hand side of the screen, we go back to the second group of riders on the road. They're trying to close up, but it looks like it might be just a little bit too much of an ask. 40 kilometres for our front group. Group 2 is a little bit further behind. So we settle ourselves in now for the last 5 kilometres of racing as Tim Cutler goes on the attack again. Another big acceleration by Tim Cutler. This is impressive riding as he makes his way past the giant camels on the left-hand side. Tim Cutler wants to make sure that he wins one round before the big money final. Well, he's just been caught. SS goes through to the front. Don't forget, the King of the Desert is at 43 kilometres. We're 2.2 kilometres from that point now, but it's still anybody's race. No one has managed to dominate in round 3 of the Sunday Race Club. Remember, we've got our other categories. We haven't seen too much of them this afternoon. Category 2 and Category 3. There's 13 Category 3 riders out here on the course as well. We're watching on the left-hand side of the screen, the second biggest group on the road with Yusuf Badur. Will Cornish is also in there, so is Travis Samuel. But these races are all about the first rider across the line at the end of the 45 kilometres and the 740 metres of racing. Tim Cutler maintaining this pace at the front, still doing 93 revs a minute, so riding a nice gear that's spinning over well. The heart rate is up well towards the red zone now, 181 beats a minute. Can he continue with this sort of exertion? Has he gone a little bit too early? Still 3.2 kilometres of racing to go. You can see up there on the top right of the screen, the yellow bar has moved all its way across. Mitch Ferry just being distanced. He's been so close. Did ride well though, didn't he? Winning sprint number 5. Those legs must be hurting now. Well, if you've enjoyed the racing, you want to take part, this is virtual racing. It's open to fans globally. You can join in. Go to MyWhoosh.com for more information. There's Michael Knudsen, right-hand side. Mitch Ferry trying to get himself back up to the front group. He's not too far behind, you know. Can he surprise everyone? Well, we're almost at the end of the King of the Desert. We've got 500 metres to go. They should see the gantry across the road any moment now. Coming up towards the hour point. Rolling along at 50 kilometers an hour. Slight downhill section. A few little rockers now towards the race finish. There's our gantry across the road. This is the end of our final sector, the King of the Desert. Then it's all about the race finish. Big sprint here by SS, who is going to be the King of the Desert this afternoon. Here's confirmation. Let's take a little bit of a look. The King of the Desert was won by SS. Time of 13 minutes, 52.877, 6.3 watts per kilo. Ahead of Bart van den Eckhout, X100 and Mitch Ferry. So it's the UAE clan team as we head towards the conclusion of this race, who are back up there at the top of the leaderboard. SS with a wonderful performance over the King of the Desert. We've completed all our sprints. We've completed our two key race sections, the King of the Jungle and the King of the Desert. Now, who's going to win this race? Round one was taken by Pablo Popovic. He's not going to take it this time, I don't think. Round two was taken by Philip Graves. Ollie Jones has finished in second place before. And we are 900 metres from the finish. They're going to see the gantry across the roads. They've got to get themselves set, get focused, get ready for the sprint. We see an acceleration. And it's Bart van den Eckhout who is the first to strike. Has he gone a little bit too early? But it looks like a real concerted effort now. Over 700 watts per kilo now. It's over 700 watts, coming up to nearly 8 watts per kilo. Bart van den Eckhout. Coming up towards him now is Philip Graves. SS is in a position just a little bit further behind. Bart van den Eckhout is the leader. Philip Graves is up there. We are not far from the finish line now. Who is going to take this victory? We're looking for the gantry across the road. Here is the finish line. Who is going to take this sprint as they hit the finish line now? Superb sprinting there. Tim Cutler was just washed away. And the rider who crossed the line first was Ollie Jones. Ollie Jones takes the victory for the Danish Pavlova team. Behind him was Vidar Mel of the Yorkshire Pudding Express and SS of the UAE clan team in third place. What a race that was. Ollie Jones wins in 1 hour, 2 minutes, 14.810. The victory goes to the Danish Pavlova team. And Ollie Jones, having taken a second place in round one, he takes the victory in round number 3. Vidar Mel, second place for him. His best performance in this Sunday Race Club, this particular qualification round. SS takes his best performance so far. Took 6th in round 1, 5th in round 2, and he finishes on the podium this time. This is Michael Knudsen. Heading up towards the conclusion of this race now. Well, we were treated to a wonderful race then. Michael Knudsen just pedalling his way up towards the end of the race. Just after coming up to 1 hour and 4 minutes. He's almost there. 300 metres to go for Michael Knudsen. Just putting out 230 odd watts per minute, spinning along nicely at 85 revs a minute with the heart rate up there at 140. He's obviously decided just to roll in. Just a reminder then of our qualification round number 3. It was Danish Pavlova's Ollie Jones who took the victory in 1 hour, 2 minutes, 14.810. Second on the podium, Yorkshire Pudding Express's Vidar Mel. And the UAE Clan team take the podium with third place with SS. Michael Knudsen finishes in 9th place. Next rider to finish, looks like it will be Pablo Popovic. Pablo Popovic is rolling along at the moment in 10th place, I think, on the road. Popovic just 1,600 metres from the line. Just rolling in nicely, just under 300 watts. Not long until he sees the finish line, and then his tough race will be over. These virtual races are incredibly hard, very, very tough on the body. You take everything out of yourself, but it is fantastic racing. Don't forget, follow MyWhoosh.com for more information and go to social media for news of MyWhoosh and the developments within it. And of course, keep up to date on MyWhoosh.com with all the events. Inside the final kilometre for Pablo Popovic, the winner of round number 1. Next weekend, we've got race number 4. And then the following weekend will be the big prize money race where the riders race for 10,000 dirhams. That race coming up on the 29th of May. 600 metres to go for Pablo Popovic. He's not far from the race finish now. Can he make it inside the top 10? Looks like he will do so. There's a confirmation. Ollie Jones took the win ahead of Vidar Mel in second place. And third, the UAE Clan team. 400 metres to go for Pablo Popovic. He's going to make it into the top 10. A good day for the UAE Clan team, but Danish Pavlova are the squad who have managed to take the victory this time. Their first win in these 3 rounds of racing. Round 1 went to the UAE Clan, second to Yorkshire Pudding, third to Danish Pavlova. Top 10 for Pablo Popovic. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget, we've got the women's race coming up. Today's victory in round 3 of the Sunday Race Club goes to Ollie Jones of Danish Pavlova. From me, Anthony McCrossan, bye for now.